Hi, superstars. It is time for social studies. We are on Unit 2. Hello, friends. Our big idea is rules help us get along. So, rules help us get along. Now, as we study through this unit, you're going to gain a better understanding of how rules and laws help us get along at school, at home, and in our community. All right, in your workbook, turn to page 21 and you'll see the Unit 2 foldable. So those are some words that you're going to be learning in this unit. So let's go through. There's a few more words here, but we're going to go through all of the new words that you're going to be learning in this unit. And the first one is vote. So here's the word vote. A vote is a choice that can be counted. So for instance, if we were having a classroom party and we had to decide, are we going to bring chocolate cake or vanilla cake? We would take a vote. So I would say, okay, raise your hand if you vote for chocolate cake. And then I would have a few kids raise their hand. So I would count who's raising their hand. And let's say 6 kids wanted chocolate cake. All right, then I would say, okay, who wants vanilla cake? So everyone would raise their hand and they would be voting if they wanted vanilla cake. And let's say 7 kids wanted vanilla cake. So that's a vote. A vote is a choice that can be counted. And when we take a vote, we know that 6 wanted chocolate and 7 wanted vanilla. So guess what? We would get vanilla cake because we counted all the votes. Okay, so a vote is a choice that can be counted. Let's go to our next word here. All right, so this word is community. Community. A community is a place where people live, work, and play. So we all live in a community. It's a place where we live, work, and play. That is community. So you are going to be tracing in your foldables on page 21 the words that we are going to be listing. So you don't have community, but you do have the word vote. And you will see the definition on the back of that page. So you're going to go through those words and learn them. Let's look at the next one. Conflict. Conflict, that's a word in your foldable. You're going to trace it and you're going to read it, and then you are going to look at the definition. Conflict. A conflict is a disagreement. So when we disagree with somebody, that's a conflict. Conflict. Say it with me. Conflict. A conflict is a disagreement. Okay. Let's go to our next word. Law. Law is our next word, and you have that word in your foldable. So you're going to trace that word, and then on the back, if you look on the back of it, it gives the definition. A law is a rule in your community. So we have rules in our community. For instance, when you ride in your car with your mom or dad, do you wear your seatbelt? You do. That is a rule. That is a law in our community. It keeps us safe. So we have to follow the laws in our community. And that is one of them, wearing your seatbelt. In our classroom, we have rules, which are laws. For instance, you have to raise your hand to speak. Maybe there's no speaking when the teacher's speaking. That's another rule, because rules keep us safe and help us learn also. There's no running in the classroom because you might trip and hurt yourself, right? So we follow laws as in our community and in our classroom and even in our home. I'm sure you have rules at home too, right? So there are rules that we follow and that keeps us safe and helps us to be happier too. Let's see what our next vocabulary word is. Responsibility. That is not in your foldable, but it is a very important word to know. A responsibility is something you must take care of. Responsibility. Let's look at an example of a responsibility. Look at the little girl has a responsibility of feeding her pet. That is a responsibility. So remember, a responsibility is something you must take care of. Responsibility. Okay, rule. Rule. A rule is something that tells what we can and cannot do. So it's like a law, but it's a rule. So here's an example of a rule. What are these kids doing? They're standing in line. See how their hands are down? They're not touching each other. They're not pushing each other. They're waiting very patiently for one student to drink out of the water fountain, and they're being safe. So the rule is you keep your hands to yourself and you wait quietly for your turn. So a rule is something that tells us what we can and cannot do. All right, so I want you to trace those words in your book on page 21. You can tear that out and have your mom or dad help you fold it, and that way you can learn some vocabulary words. All right, let's look at Rima and Lily. Rima and Lily are having an argument. So what do you think is happening between Rima and Lily? They're arguing over something. It looks like Rima is saying, "I'm so angry." And Lily is saying, "So am I." They're having a disagreement, right? So they're arguing about something they're playing with. Have you ever had a problem like this? How did you solve your problem? Let's see what Rima and Lily do. Let's look at the next box and see. All right. It looks like Rima is saying, "It's my game." And what does Lily say? "I want to try." They're having an argument. Do you think taking turns is important? Do you think rules help us get along? It looks like they are not taking turns, right? So Rima thinks it's her game. It might be her game, but Lily wants to try. So what do you think these girls should be doing? Let's look at the next page, or the next box, I'm sorry. So here, Rima is saying, "What can we do? We don't agree." And Lily says, "Can we make it fair? for you and me. So, do you think being kind to others is important? Yes, it is, isn't it? We have to follow laws and rules, right? So, is it important to listen to others? Yes, it's very important to listen to others because that's how we can play nicely. So, how can Rima and Lily solve their problem? What do you think they need to do to solve their disagreement? Well, on page 23, I want you to draw a picture to show how Rima and Lily can solve their conflict or their disagreement. So draw a picture. I will show you where to do that. It's on page 23. Okay, so here's page 23. So make sure you write your name and date up here, okay? So over here, you are going to draw a picture to show how these two girls, Rima and Lily, can solve their conflict. Remember, they are having a conflict. They cannot agree on what to do when they're playing together. So we're talking about rules, we're talking about kindness, we're talking about how we can work together. So I want to see a picture of how you think Rima and Lily can solve their conflict. So go ahead and draw it. Okay, let's turn to page 24. Let's look up here at the star. I want you to follow along as I read, okay? Carlos knows a poem that can help solve a conflict. Do you remember what a conflict is? A disagreement, when you can't agree on something. Can you say the poem with him? We do our best to get along when we are at school. We help and share and wait our turn. Kindness is our rule. All right, so that is a poem about rules, right? Okay, let's look over here at our essential question over here. What is a good way to solve a conflict? So you remember what a conflict is, right? A disagreement when you cannot agree on something. So what is a good way to solve a conflict? Well, we see some pictures over here of students, right? So what rules are these children following? What are they doing in this first picture here? What does it look like they're doing? Well, it looks like they're waiting in line, right? Because someone is drinking from the water fountain. So here it says we take turns. Are they pushing each other out of the way, saying, no, it's my turn, no, it's my turn? Are they arguing here? No, they're waiting in line patiently until this young girl drinks. And when she is finished, they will take a turn and the next person will do that and get a turn to drink. So let's look at this one right here, this next picture. What rule are these kids following? We listen. So it looks like they're in the classroom and they're listening to the teacher. They're not talking when the teacher's talking. They're being very quiet and respectful and listening. So they listen while someone else is talking. That's a rule. All right, let's turn the page. All right, we are on page 25. All right, let's look at Rima and Lily. So how did Rima and Lily solve their conflict? Remember, they had a disagreement. They had a conflict where they could not agree on how to play their game, how to play with it. So how did they solve that? What does it look like they're doing? Well, it looks like they're taking turns, right? That is how they solved their conflict. So they're following a rule, taking turns. So we have one more rule down here that we didn't talk about. These kids look like they're playing. And what are they doing? Are they playing together? It looks like they're sharing the toys. We share is another rule. So they're sharing. One of them isn't taking all of the toys saying, those are all mine. We share. So you should be sharing at home or at school. Anytime you're playing with somebody, you should be sharing. All right. So when Rima and Lily finally resolved their conflict and they decided to take turns, what is another way that they could have solved their conflict? Do you think they could have shared maybe? Yes, they could have. They could have listened to each other also, right? So if something's bothering someone, listen to the other person so that you understand what's bothering them. So let's read this up here. Let's get a different color. Okay, rules. So we're talking about rules, remember. Rules tell us what we can and cannot do. Rima and Lily follow a rule by sharing. So they're following one rule and they are sharing. So rules tell us what we can and cannot do. They're very important. What I want you to do here is draw a picture of a rule that you follow at school. Now, you're not in school right now, are you? But if you were in school, these are some of the rules you would have followed: sharing, listening, taking turns, right? So I want you to draw a picture of you following a rule at school. And down here, I want you to think about this. It says, what happens when you don't follow a rule at school? So when you don't follow rules, there is something called a consequence. Can you say that? Consequence. So when you don't follow a rule, you might get in trouble, right? You might miss recess if you weren't playing nicely. If you were talking in class, there's a consequence. If you were not being kind to somebody, there's a consequence. That means something is going to happen and you might not like it because you have to learn to follow rules. So I want you to draw your picture of you following a rule at school. And until next time, superstars, have a wonderful day.